At the Ad Asia Forum this week, Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Commercial Officer for Coca-Cola, Joe Tripodi, was here, and he was talking about the new rules of engagement between brands and consumers. Joe Tripodi, good to have you on Storyboard and on CNBC TV 18.
Great to be here.
125 years of this iconic brand.
Yes.
That's what you're celebrating this year.
Yes, we are.
What are the challenges before a marketer when you have the legacy of a brand like this, the world's most valuable brand, according to some studies, and spread over countries as diverse as India and North America?
Well, I would say one of the great challenges is just keeping the brand relevant. You know, relevance is, when a brand loses its relevance, it's in quickly a death spiral. So the amazing things about Coca-Cola and brand Coca-Cola is its ability to keep the brand relevant, despite the fact that it hasn't changed the formula in 125 years. So it's a little different. We're a little different than Apple or IBM that can come out every quarter or so with a new product. We don't do that. So we have to stay relevant through not just things like product innovation, but we also look at packaging innovation, we look at equipment innovation, and then ultimately, where the focus of this conference is, a lot on consumer engagement and how that's changing and evolving and making sure that we're very relevant in that space.
For the past 3 years, since the new CEO, Mukhtar Kent, has been in charge, you joined, I think, in 2007.
Yes.
There have been dramatic changes that have been taking place in the organization, and there is this Vision 2020, which says the company seeks to double turnover. What kind of challenge does that put before the marketer or the marketing function?
Yeah, huge challenge, because I think that first of all, when we want to double our business in basically a decade, it really requires us to look at and balance between how we grow at that accelerated pace, but also how do we do it in a sustainable way. So one of the greatest challenges that we have is making sure that we're growing the right way, the proper way, and making sure that we're living up to our commitments that we made not only to NGOs and governments around the world, but to the world community. And I think that that's critical for us to be able to grow aggressively, but in the right way. So the other challenges for marketers is how do you stay relevant, as I mentioned before, but with all these new changes that are occurring in consumer engagement, particularly the social media space. And that represents some unique challenges, but also unique opportunities. And as you know, Coca-Cola's got the world's largest Facebook fan page at 35 million members. But it's not what you have, it's what you do with it, and how you curate those fans, we have a philosophy of fans first, so we're not heavy-handed in there. We're not offering them lots of coupons for things. It's more about they own it. They own the brand, so they should own that Facebook page. And so it's a different philosophy probably than others.
So I'm going to quote something that I read, I think that you had written about this. And you said, I'm quoting you, "Our fan page wasn't started by an employee at our headquarters. Instead, it was launched by 2 consumers in LA as an authentic expression of how they felt about Coca-Cola. A decade ago, a company like ours would have sent a cease and desist letter from our lawyers." I found that extremely interesting, because it really, I think, suggests the kind of structural DNA coding change that you would need to do, isn't it, as an organization to cope with social media?
Yeah, and particularly the cultural change that's required, the mindset change that's required, because you're absolutely right. I did say that, and it's an evolution for any company to understand and to disconnect and say, wait a minute, we really don't own the brand. Those people there that buy it, they own it, and they have the love for it. We're the stewards of it, but at the end of the day, they own it. And as a consequence, to disconnect and to step back and to let them do things with it, to have fun with it, that takes an organization that has a lot of confidence in itself, but also a maturity about the new world order that we operate in. And that new world order says that a single consumer can spread an awful lot of good about your brand, and they can also spread an awful lot of half-truths or untruths about your brand. And so understanding that, and I think the other thing, though, is how we're thinking about kind of an enterprise-wide solution to social media, because social media doesn't just end at 5 p.m. when people go home. Social media is on 24/7. If you're not there to answer that half-truth or that misrepresentation of your company at 5:01, if you're not there, then it's going to sit there for hours and hours, and then can have an opportunity to multiply. And so it's absolutely critical for any company, particularly ours, to engage with those people in conversations, to always have a respond to people who are making comments on our business.
So you have to have the mindset,
Yep.
but on the other hand, operationally, what
Yes.
do you need? What does the marketing team need to do? Is it external PR? Is it corporate communications? How does marketing? I want to know operationally how
Sure.
this is put in place.
Historically, it was like marketers were the brand, and the PR people were the corporate brand. That's all gone, because here's the reality. If you don't have you can have the strongest brand in the world, as we do, but if you have your reputation under siege, it isn't going to matter. You're not going to be successful in the brand. We've also seen that if your category is under siege, as it is in some markets, some developed markets where there's a lot of attack on sparkling beverages, that's also an issue. So the key now as a company is we've got to manage not just the brand and the corporate reputation, but make sure the category is strong. And we are carrying that mantle aggressively around the world. So very, very different mindset of how we are approaching this with public affairs. Now, the other part of this is using the call centers and your infrastructure around the world, so that, in all call centers you have peak flow times and downtimes. Use those people in order to respond to these consumer comments, whether they're good, bad, or ugly. And so we're learning how to do that now and take kind of an enterprise-wide approach to this. But the one thing we're not going to do is not respond to people who say things about us.
We're talking so much about social media and the role that it's playing. I believe 20% of your media budget is going to social media?
It depends on the market, but I would say if we probably looked at it around the world, it's probably somewhere between 12 and 18%, right?
So what is the role that traditional media is playing for Coca-Cola?
Well, traditional media is going to still play a very important role for us. So no one is saying that television is going away. People are watching more TV than ever.
Extreme statements,
right? I think it's really a question of the mix. And so the greatest challenge I see two great challenges for marketers. Number one is how you get all this, how you access, develop, curate, source content. Quality content. You can get a lot of content. Some of it's not very good. So a content aggregation strategy. And then the other big challenge for marketers is how you move that content out over all these different endpoints. Some of those endpoints are digital. It could be your cell phone. They could be a digital sign. They could be TV and internet, or it could be analog. It could just be a standard out-of-home sign. So that's the challenge: is how you allocate your resources against all these different touch points. And that is more, at this point, I would say, is a lot more art than science. But we're working through a deeper understanding of the modeling as to how you optimize your spend and optimize your connection planning. And that's why we talk now about it as content management and connections planning. Very different than when we used to talk about, let's go make a 30-second TV commercial or 30-second piece of film that's going on television.
Yeah.
It's a very different world now.
Sponsorships is the other thing that Coca-Cola is famous for.
Yes.
We know about FIFA last year at the World Cup in South Africa, the Football World Cup in South Africa. I was in Beijing in 2008 and I actually went and saw the Coca-Cola Pavilion.
Yes.
What you're going to be doing in London 2012 is going to be a little different, isn't it? Because it's much more thematic and there's a positioning thing that's happening there as opposed to what I saw, I think, in Beijing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Beijing was really the global coming out party for China, and it was an incredible event that probably will never be duplicated. I've never seen anything like Beijing. I think London is a little different for us, and we've evolved our thinking as how we think of the Olympics as a property and all our major properties. We see the Olympics as a tactic now to reach the strategic objective, which is youth engagement, team recruitment. And so it's very different as opposed to just let's leverage the property. It's more about let's leverage the property for this higher order, what we would call must-win battle around engaging teens in our brand and our business. We also want to engage them to be more active. And so a lot of this And our whole approach in London is going to be around, move to the beat of the games, move to the beat of sport. And so getting people up and moving and being active is a real focus for us.
So the London Games and what we'll see in terms of the marketing effort that Coca-Cola does during that time is going to be more brand strategic for the brand than what we saw, let's say, in China?
Well, China was also strategic, but it was strategic in a different way. It was really trying to build awareness for the brand. I think also, but in China, where we needed that and getting people to understand how they drink Coca-Cola, and also we wanted the Chinese to understand what Coca-Cola, how you consume it, but also we wanted the Chinese to love it. In the case of London 2012, we're really focused on using the property to get our teens more engaged with our business. And so what we're going to do here in London 2012 will be much more contemporary, much more leading edge, maybe some bleeding edge. It'll probably make some people uncomfortable, which is a good thing.
In the introduction, we specified that you're the Chief Marketing Officer and the Chief Commercial Officer. This seems to suggest, a sort of fusion of right brain, left brain approaches to the marketing function. Is that a balance that's difficult to achieve sometimes? Because you tend to believe marketing is about brand and emotive and inspirational and a bit fuzzy sometimes.
Sure.
So you're not sure what it's really doing.
Yeah,
but you feel good and your agencies feel good. But on the other hand, there's a lot of just details.
Totally. Well, what we say, you need to balance inspirational marketing and operational marketing. And that it doesn't do any good if we run a fabulous, emotive, passionate television commercial in prime time last night here in India, and then when the consumer goes into a store, the product's not available, or the package isn't the right size, or the price is too high, or the merchandising is non-existent. So it's got to be both. The genius of the and is you've got to balance inspirational and operational. So we said, don't think that a really strong communications campaign is going to solve fundamental business problems. In some instances, companies think that their great TV campaign is going to solve a problem when they might have a bad product, or they might have less availability, or their pricing structure might be out of whack.
But you see marketers guilty of doing that, or do you see marketers tending to do that?
Marketers tend to do that because marketers tend to be more romantic. They tend to they believe in a higher order, and that's the way we want our marketers. But that's why we also want them to understand that simple brand solutions are not the answer. What we really want them is to come with holistic business solutions that address all the way from idea to shelf. That's the way we talk about from the idea to the shelf, a holistic view of the business that we think that will deliver a bigger payoff for us.
Coca-Cola has just launched this Arctic Refuge for the Polar Bear campaign,
Arctic
right?
Home, yes.
And this is a big initiative that makes where your packaging changes. You have white cans and white bottle covers, contributing some portion of what you've earned on this to building this Arctic Refuge for polar bears. Now, what I want to link this to is the fact that big corporations like yours are all investing, and not in CSR, but actual sustainability projects that are good for society, good for the company's business. And everybody's talking about it. All companies are talking about it. The question is that while you need to do this, it doesn't remain a differentiator anymore, does it? Because everybody's doing it.
Well, I would tell you that I think that our Arctic Home program is going to be a differentiator. I think it's highly disruptive. I think when you walk in and if you turn 1.4 billion Coke cans red to white, people are going to notice that. That's going to gain some attention. I think also the mechanism that we're using to stimulate, $1 donations, so you can get a parcel of land in your name as part of this Arctic Refuge. I think we're going to find out whether this kind of mechanism or structure or framework around kind of micro donations is an effective way in order to go after this. I think the biggest thing with corporate social responsibility is you have to be sure that the hype doesn't get ahead of your reality. It's when the hype gets ahead of the reality that people get very cynical and accuse companies of greenwashing. Our philosophy at Coke, we've moved beyond checkbook philanthropy. That's over. We have deep partnerships with people like the WWF on the Arctic Home program, with Greenpeace on carbon issues, we have deep partnerships with many NGOs around the world, but we have specific deliverables that we have to work towards with those people.
Having said that, I think what I'm trying to get at is that if all companies do this, it becomes, you know, a hygiene factor.
Sure.
That everybody needs to do it in the society we are in today. Then do these initiatives become something that you can use to differentiate the brand, that then becomes a talking point?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, you'd love to be able to differentiate it to your brand on that basis, but if everyone does it, that's a good thing for the world. And so that's only a good thing. And if we don't necessarily look at at Coke sustainability as a competitive advantage. We look at sustainability as an imperative as a good corporate citizen. So if we don't gain competitive advantage from sustainability, that's fine with us, as long as we've helped improve the world in some way.
Coca-Cola CEO Mukhtar Kent, I think earlier this year, said that we shouldn't be surprised if India ends up becoming, one of the top 5 companies for you in the next 5 years.
Right.
19% growth, I believe, in the last quarter,
Yes.
and consecutive, I think, 21 quarters.
Yes.
You've spent about 4 or 5 days here this week. You've been on a focus group study.
Yes, with teens.
You're planning to visit a school where you all are invested,
Yes,
in terms
absolutely.
of CSR. What's your sense of the Indian market?
Oh, when I come to India, I'm energized. I mean, because I think the optimism of the people, the entrepreneurship that we see, the desire to get ahead, the desire to move the country to another level it's a very different feel when I go to India and China and Brazil than when I go to the capitals of Western Europe, for example. Not that things aren't happening that are important there, but this is a very dynamic environment, and it's a challenging environment because there's no question about it. But it represents so much opportunity for our company.
And will that come from bigger market share, or just wider penetration, or will it also come from more brand launches, because you have 500 products globally, and you have what, like a handful of them in India?
I don't think we need a lot more. Yeah, we can decide to play, and we will decide to play in a few other categories, but fundamentally I'd like to go deeper in a few categories and get more penetration and get the per caps up, because the per capita consumption in India for us is fairly low on a national basis. When you look at it, let's say in Delhi or Bombay, the per caps would be higher, and then when you get into some markets, it's very high. It's at the world average, but overall, normalized for 1.2 billion people, we believe there's big opportunity. But the trends are there for us. The trends of urbanization, the trends of middle class development, those are all, when people have moved to cities and when they get more money, their life changes, and they want packaged beverages. Their life is on the go more, and it's a whole different mindset. And as a consequence, we think we're well positioned. That gives us a lot of tailwinds to drive our business to new heights here.
Coca-Cola advertising has changed, I feel, as an observer over the past few years. So, around the mid-2000, 2004, 2005, we saw some very rooted in India kind of advertising. The last 2 or 3 years, we are seeing campaigns that are good, but sort of, generic or general. Is there a standardization that's happening in the communication, which is sort of universal? So, if you're saying open happiness or happiness factory, that gets translated, but it gets lost in translation. Whereas some of the work I referred to, which is very, very rooted, and which probably wouldn't resonate with any Coke drinker anywhere else in the world, is probably more effective.
Yeah. No, there's no attempt. Our philosophy is we're not sitting in headquarters making advertising for India. I can promise you that.
Absolutely.
But what we try to do is find what this brand should stand for example, on a global level. And
that's the third plug-in through the interview. Marketers.
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you. But I think what we're trying to say is, it stands for this optimism, happiness, positivity. Yeah, that's what it stands for. It's kind of the antidote. We call it the antidote to modern day woe. Now, the reality is the woe is going to be different in India versus China versus the U.S. versus France. And so we want the people at a local level to embrace that and interpret it in a local level. If they're not doing that in the most precise way to get in and kind of bring you in emotionally, then I need to take a look and have that conversation.
But there is no attempt at a sort of universal, standardized
what we'll
message
do
that
is
you want to
when we
put in.
launched the Open Happiness campaign almost 3 years ago, we'll launch it with a pool of work and say this is what we mean by this, by a whole visual identity system, by ads at the point for that you can use in store, a digital look of, but at the end of the day, it's what we call freedom in a framework. You have the freedom to adopt your creative and your messaging within the framework of what the brand stands for. We did want a consistent tagline with Open Happiness because we thought there was some power to that. But the people here have total freedom to deliver the best work that they can deliver, and if they're not, then I need to check that reel.
So we're talking at a time when New York and different cities in Europe and in the US are seeing Occupy Wall Street inspired movements. Clearly, what we saw, in headlines and in the business and financial sector that affected people in 2008 is in 2011 seeming to spill out in the streets. People are unhappy. For a brand that promises happiness, what's the impact on consumer sentiment and confidence that these movements have, you think?
In some countries in the world, I wouldn't paint the whole world with the same brush, but absolutely, all the change that's going on, all the uncertainty certainly affects confidence. I would tell you, it affects our business a little less because, let's be honest, we ended last year at 25.5 billion cases sold. We increased 1.1 billion cases in 2010. That was a 5% growth factor. And, it's the law of large numbers. When you get that big, it's hard to grow 2, 3, 4, 5%. But we grew 5%. We also grew 5% through the first 3 quarters of this year. So we're continuing to deliver. Our business is not like durables, so like TVs or washing machines or things like that, where people are not probably being a little less, they're being much more cautious in with those businesses than they are with us. Our business is we're selling moments of pleasure for cents at a time, and moments of happiness for cents at a time, or moments of refreshment at cents at a time, across a wide range of portfolios. So it's a little different. Sure, we're impacted particularly in our restaurant. We have a massive business in North America in quick service restaurants. If people don't have confidence, they don't go out and eat as much, and that hurts your business to some degree. But I think fundamentally our business is very strong. It's very solid, and we believe that the best is yet to come.
Lovely meeting you, George.
It was a great conversation.